Today at the National Press Club, Deputy Liberal leader Ted O'Brien. In his first address as the Shadow Treasurer, Ted O'Brien will outline the opposition's economic priorities in a pitch to young voters. Ted O'Brien with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name is Tom Connell. I'm the President of the club and anchor at Sky News Australia. Our guest today is the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Treasurer, Ted O'Brien. It's his first address as Shadow Treasurer. He was here at the club not long ago for the energy debate, though, during the election. It's perhaps an understatement to say the Coalition is living in interesting times. Record low number of seats in Parliament, record low primary rating and news poll, but Ted O'Brien has taken up his share of quixotic tasks over the years. He was chair of the Australian Republican movement from 2005 to 2007, a few years after, of course, the failed referendum. In 2007, he tried to win the seat of Brisbane off Labor, swimming against the tide of Kevin 07. He gave it his best shot. He even had his wife wearing a sandwich board during one campaign stop, and he had his own slogan to rival Kevin 07. It was time for Ted. A big welcome as well to his wife, Dr Sophia. It didn't quite work, no. He's a welcome to his wife as well in the audience, Dr Sophia O'Brien, having recently completed her PhD in international law. In 2013, Ted O'Brien was pre-selected in the relatively safe seat of Fairfax. All the momentum was with the Coalition. Enter the big spending Clive Palmer, who won the seat by 53 votes. In 2016, it was finally time for Ted. Clive tapped the mat after an inglorious 3 years, and since that time he has risen quickly through the ranks. He's taken on the crucial energy, of course, a role of energy spokesperson in the last term, and now Shadow Treasurer and Deputy Leader, as the opposition takes aim at Labor over the familiar ground of debt and deficits, and also the new battleground of intergenerational fairness as younger Australians struggle with the dual issues of high taxation and soaring house prices. His academic credentials as well include a Master of Economics from the London School of Economics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ted O'Brien.
Tom, thank you very much, and to the board of the Press Club, sponsors, members and guests. I'm particularly grateful that Tom mentioned Clive Palmer, because it gives me a twitch every time, having gone through that wonderful experience. And Tom, you're right, this is the second time actually I've been at the Press Club, and the first time was earlier this year where I had the pleasure of debating Chris Bowen on energy. And for those who have been to or watched Press Club events before, it seems to be somewhat of a tradition that you are gifted a Press Club membership card with your name inscribed on the card. Well, that did happen when I debated Chris Bowen, but when I got back to the apartment and I pulled out everything from my pockets, pulled out the card, and sure enough, I looked at it, didn't have the name Ted O'Brien on it, but Chris Bowen. And so when I was invited to speak here today, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to, and I thought, you know what, I wouldn't mind a card. And so I don't know if I will get one today, Tom. I'm hoping I might. There you go. And we'll wait to see if that actually has the name Ted O'Brien or Jim Chalmers on it. If it actually has the words Jimflation, I promise to frame it. But I'm not here today, of course, to speak about membership cards. I'm actually here today to talk about Jess. Jess is 38 years of age. She's married to Matt, and together they're raising their two little children, one in primary school and one in kindy. And they're doing it pretty tough right now. They rent a little two-bedroom townhouse in the outer suburbs. Their girls are sharing a bedroom, and their lounge room is really more of a playroom with the toys piled up all over the place. They dream of one day buying a place of their own. But every time Jess checks the online mortgage calculator, the numbers just do not add up. This is not how Jess thought her life would be. And she's angry. Because if the Australian dream of home ownership is out of reach for her, well, her children will have Buckley's chance of even having the dream in the first place. In recent years, their rent has gone up by 20%, electricity bills 40%, and their weekly grocery shop is now nearly $300. Jess is working her tail off and looking after the kids at the same time. But it feels futile. Matt does long hours as a brickie and does some odd jobs on the side to earn some extra money to treat the kids here and there. And if worry about the kids weren't enough, well, Jess's dad has Alzheimer's and her mum is struggling right now to care for him at home. This is the Australian story of 2025. When talking about economic policy, it's easy to get caught up in a whole bunch of big numbers and economic detail. But strong economic management is really all about Jess. A strong economy is not an end unto itself, but a means to an end. It is a means by which Jess and Matt and the kids can aspire to have a better life. But the sad truth is that today, our intergenerational compact is fraying, and all signs point to further disintegration. As Liberals in 2025, our mission must be to assure Jess and the millions of millennials just like her, the younger Gen Zs and the younger still Gen Alphas, that we see them and we are here to serve them. In today's address, I'm going to be running through a whole bunch of economic detail. But as I do, can you please keep front of mind the story of Jess? Little more than an hour ago, the Australian Office of Financial Management issued another $700 million in new debt on behalf of the Albanese government. I'll forgive you for not having noticed, as it happens 2 to 3 times a week, nearly every week. Just yesterday, they issued $400 million in new debt. And on Friday, they'll issue another $900 million. That's $2 billion, or $2,000 million, in debt in just 4 days. The Albanese government has already issued $58 billion in new debt this financial year, and it plans to take that up to around $150 billion in new debt before the end of this financial year. Our national debt will soon exceed $1 trillion for the very first time. And Labor's plan is for it to exceed $1.2 trillion by the next election. That's why many are calling Jim Chalmers the $1 trillion treasurer. But we shouldn't forget that the states and territories also owe collectively more than $600 billion, liabilities that are ultimately backed by the Commonwealth. That takes government borrowings in Australia to more than $1.5 trillion, a debt so big that it has lost all meaning to the everyday Australian. But what it really means is that our governments have taken out a credit card in Jess's name, in Matt's name, and in the name of their kids, in the order of $60,000 each. Every child born in Australia today enters the world $60,000 behind. And every minute that goes by, they fall further behind. But it wasn't always like this. By 2007, the Howard government had paid down our national debt. Through the 2 economic crises since, debt ratcheted back up. As RBA Governor Michelle Bullock reminded us recently, we're meant to replenish our fiscal buffers in the good times to prepare for the bad times. But believe it or not, right now these are meant to be the good times. Yet Labor is planning 11 deficits in a row. To those who think our debt is no big deal, never forget the dangers of compound interest. At around 35% of GDP, Australia's debt today is roughly where America's was before September 11 attacks. But US debt has now passed 100% of GDP, near its all-time record following the Second World War, and it's hurtling towards 120%. Now, Australia isn't the United States, but we also can't afford to go where they have gone. We may be nowhere near that point today, but I do fear that's the direction we're heading towards. And make no mistake, if we are ill-prepared for our next major crisis, it will be young people, especially those entering the workforce, who will bear the brunt. The best time to act on this would have been 3 years ago. The next best time is now. Our dire financial circumstances are no accident. They aren't the result of bad luck or of mismanagement by the previous government. We know this because the Albanese government has been, quite literally, the luckiest government in Australian history. Over the 4 budget years this government has overseen, it has been the beneficiary of an all-time record $255 billion in net budget upgrades. Record terms of trade have driven record corporate tax revenues, while decades-high inflation has driven record personal income tax revenues. And yet, Labor has driven the budget into deficit and will keep it there for at least a decade. The rivers of gold flowing into Treasury have driven a deep complacency in this government's economic management. They have allowed the Treasurer to act as though his decisions have no cost, but they do have a cost. It's what economists refer to as opportunity costs. Labor's windfall could have paid off a quarter of our national debt in just 4 years. Imagine if you had received an unexpected windfall that allowed you to pay down a quarter of your mortgage in just 4 years. In fact, when I talk to the banks, and I recognise Westpac for its role here today, when I talk to the banks, they tell me that's exactly what Australian households do. When interest rates are cut, most people use the extra cash they have to pay down debt, to pay down their mortgage. When it comes to their own finances, the Australian people are prudent because they understand a massive debt burden consigns them and their children to a poorer and more vulnerable future. But this Labor government does not reflect those same values. The Treasurer doesn't like to admit this, but if you study his budget papers, you will see he has taken decisions that have raised the national debt by around $100 billion. In the financial year just ended, government spending grew at the extraordinary pace of 5.5% over and above inflation. If you go back to the Coalition's final budget in 2022, you will see that we planned real spending growth in that same financial year of just 0.4%. So Labor delivered real spending growth last year that was 13 times higher than the Coalition had budgeted for. And in case you think this was driven by things like the NDIS or debt interests, think again. It was primarily this government's discretionary decisions. Last financial year's $10 billion deficit would have been a $12 billion surplus under the Coalition's budget settings as laid out in the 2022 pre-election economic and fiscal outlook prepared by Treasury. Chalmers' decisions turned a Coalition surplus into a Labor deficit. Over the last 3 years, Australia's economic output has grown by $300 billion per year. Over that same period, government spending has grown by $150 billion per year. That means the Albanese government has been buying up to half of all new economic output, double the government's usual share. This government has been out there competing with everyday Australian households for products and services, bidding up the price of everything. And as we saw just an hour or so ago in the latest inflation figures from the ABS, inflation is back up to an extraordinary 3.8%, above market expectations and well above the RBA's forecasts, both in headline and underlying terms. With just 29 days until Christmas, this is the worst possible news for struggling mortgage holders, who can now kiss goodbye to any rate cut at all. And that dream of home ownership just keeps getting further away for the likes of Jess and Matt and for their children. And that is why I refer to it as Gymflation, or the Gymflation effect. It is a direct consequence of the spending spree by the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. And that's also why living standards, by the way, have fallen more sharply in Australia than in any other advanced economy. Jim Chalmers boasts that real wages are growing again. Notice he says growing, but avoids mentioning the level of real wages, because they're actually 2.2% lower today than when he took office. If real wages continue to grow at their current pace, what's happened recently, it will take more than 13 years to get back to where they were when Labor took office. Ladies and gentlemen, there's another, even more direct way young Australian workers are paying for Labor's spending spree. Under Labor, personal income taxes have already reached an all-time record high as a share of the economy. That remains the case even after Labor delivered the Coalition's Stage 3 tax cuts. Personal income taxes last financial year were $74 billion, or 28% higher than under the Coalition. That's $5,000 a year for every taxpayer. Can you imagine what Jess and Matt could have done with an extra $5,000 in their pockets? But this is only the beginning. The Treasurer's own budget makes clear his assault on young workers will only intensify over coming decades. Jim Chalmers is proud of his path back to surplus in 10 years' time. But what he doesn't admit is that his budget only returns to balance because he's planning to hike personal income taxes by nearly $500 billion over the next decade. This isn't speculation. It's right there in his own budget papers. If instead personal income taxes were to remain at today's all-time record high, that same share of the economy, then Labor's deficit would widen from 1.5% of GDP today to 2.1% of GDP in a decade's time. Debt wouldn't stabilise. It would keep growing without limit. Labor's plan is to paper over its growing deficits by letting personal income taxes rip even faster. That's why opposition leader Susan Lee has made it clear that we will take a personal income tax package to the next election, because young Australian workers can't afford $500 billion of personal income tax increases under Labor. Cleaning up after Labor governments is what the Coalition does. It's the natural order of things in Australian politics. After the Hawke and Keating deficits, it took years of discipline by the Coalition to balance the budget, but we did it. After the Gillard-Rudd deficits, it took years of discipline by the Coalition governments, but we did it. And after the Albanese deficits, I dare say it will again take years of discipline by a Coalition government to get the budget back in balance. But I can assure you we will do it. But balancing the budget doesn't happen by itself. Just ask Peter Costello. That's why he laid down the Charter of Budget Honesty. Reading it now, nearly 30 years later, it feels every bit as vital. But as former Treasury Secretary Ken Henry has noted, we need to breathe new life into the Charter. It doesn't need to be rewritten. It just needs to be followed. The starting point is to commit to quantifiable fiscal rules so treasurers can be held accountable if they do not abide by them. I believe that's why Jim Chalmers, on becoming Treasurer, threw out the fiscal rulebook. He simply did not want to be held to account. Instead, at estimates recently, under questioning by my colleague, Senator James Paterson, a Treasury official was asked to search excruciatingly through the Treasurer's fiscal strategy to find just one single numeral, just one number. He failed to find even one. After admitting there were no numbers, it was almost like a scene straight out of Yes Minister. The poor public servant offered that there were things quantitative in here, just without numbers. That sums up Chalmers' fiscal strategy beautifully. It's a word salad. The key problem with his lack of quantifiable fiscal rules is that without him, his budget forecasts are simply not credible. They are predicated on the Treasurer doing two things. First, immediately halving the rate of growth in spending he's been racking up to date. And second, raising personal income taxes by nearly $500 billion over a decade. If the Treasurer doesn't intend to deliver that plan, laid out in black and white in his own budget papers, then he should explain to the Australian people how else he intends to deliver on his forecasts. Either way, the starting point must be for the Treasurer to commit to a set of quantifiable rules so he can be held to account for doing so. Fiscal rules are vital, and that's my challenge for Jim Chalmers today. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever I talk about economic policy, I frame the challenge around two imperatives. The first is to stop the spending spree, ensuring your budget is sustainable, that taxpayers are getting value for money. That is the foundation of strong economic management. As Liberals, that's our bread and butter. But once that's bedded down, there's a second imperative that's even more important, and that's to start growing the economic pie. There is simply nothing more critical to raising the living standards of our children and grandchildren than the capacity of our economy to deliver. Today, we are living off the productivity gains of the generations before us. The generation before you builds your foundation, then you build on it for the next generation. That is the intergenerational compact. But that intergenerational compact is breaking. As the Productivity Commission has shown, for the first time in our history, those entering the workforce today are not experiencing higher living standards than those who came before. And it's getting worse, not better. In the last 3 years, productivity growth hasn't just been sluggish, it has gone backwards by an extraordinary 5%. This has dire implications for our children and grandchildren, not just for their real wages, but for their capacity to pay down that massive debt and for the sustainability of the essential services on which they will rely. Immigration has played an important role in our economic development throughout our history, but more recently it has been stretched beyond breaking point. Labor's overreach has tested the patience of the Australian public and it has frayed our social bindings. As my colleague Senator Dave Sharma warned in a speech at the Sydney Institute recently, economic stagnation will generate political frictions as we resort to fighting over a shrinking pie. And none of this augurs well for our future or for the future we bequeath to our children and grandchildren. And I fear Labor has given up on them. Labor governments of the distant past understood that before you cut up the pie, you have to have a pie in the first place to cut up. But today's Labor doesn't think like that. They seem to believe that you can tax your way to prosperity and regulate your way to productivity. The Treasurer entered this term of government with a plan to tax unrealised capital gains, solely with an eye to raising revenue to fund his spending spree, and without a second's thought for the economic consequences. It's all about redistributing a shrinking pie. And as my colleague Senator Bragg has rightly pointed out, Labor's uncapped 5% deposit scheme will simply expand housing demand, force up house prices and push home ownership further away, push away home ownership further away and out of reach for so many. We all know that supply is how you grow that pie. Meanwhile, Labor's enabling of the cartel of corruption, as my colleague Tim Wilson often refers to, benefits their union paymasters at the expense of the taxpayers and first home buyers forced to pick up the bill of an 18% fall in construction productivity over a decade. But there's probably no better example today of how Labor's misguided economic agenda is robbing our future, and that is AI. The world stands on the threshold of a profound economic transformation, powered by data centres, AI and advanced computing. Data centres supply the foundational infrastructure. Advanced computing monetises that infrastructure at scale, and AI creates demand for both. It is impossible to know for sure just how big this opportunity is, but global capital markets are betting it will be the most profound economic transformation since the advent of the internet. I think they're right. We can already see the potential of AI as what economists call a labour augmenting technology, which will generate higher real wages for Australian workers. But as my colleague Alex Hawke recently made clear, prudent guardrails are needed, including not legalising theft, rejecting the regulatory Wild West and ensuring contracts rules. And I am pleased the government seems to be responding positively to Alex's comments, including this week's announcement of an AI Safety Institute, which we welcome in principle. But we should really be thinking of AI as an economic opportunity to grow the economic pie. We need to raise our ambition because AI offers potential far beyond helping us out at work or in our daily lives. AI leadership in Southeast Asia is up for grabs, and we should take it. We should participate across the supply chain so we can be AI makers, not just takers. We should seek to host data from other countries here in Australia and to export AI services from Australia into Southeast Asia and beyond. Australia is uniquely placed to lead due to three natural advantages. First, our institutions, our liberal democracy, legal and governance frameworks, our world-class education, science and research capabilities, and our highly skilled workforce. Second, our geography, our enviable access to an abundance of energy in our own country and our proximity to markets in Southeast Asia. And third, our relationships, not just our close and trusted relations with our nearest neighbours, but our deep and enduring strategic relationship with the United States, evidenced by their granting us access to Tier 1 advanced AI chips. Much of my 20-plus years in business prior to politics was spent negotiating large deals internationally. Business alliances, outsourcing deals, joint ventures, mergers and acquisitions and whatnot. It's probably that background that leads me to believe that there are times when governments need to think like deal makers, not just policy makers. And when it comes to AI, I believe this is one of those times. In a recent speech here at the National Press Club, Scott Farquhar proposed the concept of digital embassies to, I quote, secure sovereign cloud vaults that host countries' most important data. Now, big ideas like this, well, at the very least, they should be scrutinised and considered. And there are other ideas that should be explored, such as an energy-intensive economic zone or multiple zones in regional areas that could host clusters of critical AI infrastructure, attracting capital, talent and cutting-edge technology. I look forward to working with Alex Hawke and Simon Kennedy to explore these ideas, along with the Coalition Policy Committee for the Australian Economy, led by Simon and also Senator Jane Hume. AI is an undeniable economic opportunity, having the potential to cure many of the economic ills about which I've already spoken today. But Labor's policy settings are actively hostile towards it. A maze of regulation, whether it be planning, environmental approvals or industrial relations, has pushed out the time it takes to get a data centre approved. Ours is the slowest approval process in Southeast Asia, a leading global technology company told me just recently. Meanwhile, this government is intent on taxing the capital needed to finance the AI build-out. Their super tax was just the beginning, as Pat Conahan knows also only too well. Labor will be coming after other capital taxes. They've always been prepared to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Just ask Senator Susan McDonald about Labor's mining tax. But when I talk to the leaders in AI, they tell me these barriers pale in comparison to the single biggest blocker to the build-out of our future digital economy, and that is energy. AI has an insatiable thirst for energy, but under Labor, we don't have enough affordable energy to meet our existing demand profile, let alone to power a new digital economy. We can't even keep our smelters running in this country. The solution is simple. Every available technology that can generate energy should be on the table. Nothing should be left off. Yet Labor is forcing the premature closure of coal plants. They've been stifling the supply of gas. They've stalled their renewable rollout, and they refuse to even contemplate nuclear energy, a clean energy source that OpenAI, Google, Amazon, Microsoft and Meta are all investing in. Labor calls its net zero transition a new industrial revolution. But the Industrial Revolution was all about raising productivity. Labor's energy transition is lowering productivity. It is the polar opposite of an industrial revolution. If anything, it's revolution in deindustrialisation. Labor's dogged pursuit of its net zero energy transition will ultimately hold Australia back from seizing the AI opportunity. Yet again, Labor is consigning the next generation to a poorer future. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm conscious I've taken you on quite a journey in this address today, centred around the need for Labor to stop its spending spree and to start growing the economic pie. But my real message goes directly to Jess. And that is to say, Jess, we get it. We're formulating policies to make it easier for you and Matt to buy that first home. We're formulating policies to bring down your energy bills. We're formulating policies to put more money back in your pocket. We're formulating policies so you and one day your children can aspire to a better future with high-paying jobs. Two potential futures lie ahead for young Australians. One mapped out by Labor and the other one mapped out by the Coalition. Unless Labor stops its spending spree and starts growing the economic pie, it will hand over to the next generation a future Australia that is poor, weak and dependent. Under the Coalition, because we understand the importance of a strong economy and we know the intergenerational compact must be honoured, we will hand the next generation a future Australia that is not poor but prosperous, is not weak but strong, is not dependent but fiercely independent. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks, Ted. You asked us to keep Jess in mind. I always follow instructions. I'm envisaging you telling Jess we'll cut your taxes and we'll help balance the budget. Now, if she were to say to you, well, if you're going to do that, will there need to be significant spending cuts? What would your response be?
The first thing I'd say to Jess is, Jess, we understand why things are tough now, and we will do everything we can over the next 2.5 years before the next election to first and foremost hold this government to account, because their spending spree has to stop. The second thing I'd say to Jess is the only cut we are interested in is a cut in taxes, because you're paying an extra $5,000 out of your pocket for taxes. That's the cut we are focused on. Tom, more generally on the issue of tax cuts, of cuts and spending restrictions. I respect that every government has a right to decide on their own spending priorities. That's the right of any government. Don't deny that. But with that right comes a commensurate responsibility. And the responsibility is, as a government, you have to find room in your budget to pay for them. That's what you've got to do. As a government, if you want to spend more, you've got to find the offsets. And therefore, it's not the responsibility of an opposition to find the offsets for a government's spending priorities. To Jess, I'd say, before the next election, you'll see our priorities, and the extent to which that requires more spending. We'll be the ones to tell you how we will be making room for the budget to pay for it.
Plenty of questions to get through. Let's get straight to them. Yes, you can stand up. Phil Curry from the AFR.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Mr O'Brien. Look, back in January, in the lead up to the election, Peter Dutton gave a very similar speech to that you've given today and Susan Lee has given recently on budget management. Peter at the time said there'll be a need for economic surgery should the coalition win, and then over the following months you've copied nearly every spending announcement Labor made without hesitation. So I'm just wondering, in terms of fair dinkumness, how fair dinkum you are about spending restraint and how brave you're prepared to be. For example, the government at the moment is deliberating whether to roll over the electricity bill rebates beyond December 31. They've spent $6.8 billion on those rebates since 2022. Are you prepared to say here and now that's the sort of thing they shouldn't do anymore? That's the sort of tough decisions that are needed?
Phil, thanks very much. And Jess is feeling the pain, Phil, and that's who I think about when it comes to whether or not she needs help with electricity. I think the key thing the government needs to do is start focusing on the source of the problem. That should be the priority. They have a part-time energy minister now in Chris Bowen. He should really be focusing full-time on getting energy prices down. Again, we've seen this reflected through the inflation figures today. And so we'll wait to see whatever the government wants to bring forward. You're right, they're weighing things up. Let them weigh it up. If they have a proposal, we'll do what we continue to do, and that is we'll be constructive where we can, critical where we must. So we'll wait to see with that. When it comes to earlier this year, I'm not going to prosecute the last election. That's not what we're here for. We are absolutely focused on the future. We are being values-led in that regard, and that means putting economic management at the centre. Some of my colleagues and I have made comments about some of our economic positions before the election. I won't be ventilating that again today, but that's all on the public record.
Cheers.
Thanks, Phil.
Pretty simple to say, though, whether or not the rebate should continue, surely?
Well, if you're telling me, Tom, today that that is what the government has come out and proposed, has that been announced by the Treasurer?
That's just your view. You can be front leading on this.
So we'll wait to see.
Okay.
If the Treasurer wishes to put something on the table, then we'll do what we always do. We'll weigh it up constructively and we'll respond.
Matthew Cranston from The Australian.
Mr O'Brien, it's been 6 months and 23 days since the election, and the Coalition hasn't announced one single substantive income tax reform measure or one single fiscal rule. Why is that? And I'll give you a multiple choice. Is it A, that you don't have a policy developed on either of those two yet? Is it B, that the opposition leader won't let you get out and start selling that yet to make sure that the risk is mitigated from last time when it was too late to start selling some of the policies? Or is it C, something else, and can you explain that? And just on AI, can you tell us how you're going to create these special energy zones?
Thank you, Matt, for a double dip question, which just breached Tom's rules, but I'll answer both. Look, on the first one, we have absolutely been focused on developing our own fiscal rules, and we will release them in due course. I can't give everything to you on the one day, Matt. The real point I'm making today is one of the reasons why the country's in such an economic mess is ever since Peter Costello introduced the Charter of Budget Honesty, every single Treasurer has had quantifiable fiscal rules except this one. And that's the point. Because, as I said before, it's a good 2.5 years before the next election. And it's only Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers who can introduce those rules to start controlling their spending. And so I can confirm that, of course, by virtue of us emphasising the importance of quantifiable fiscal rules, we will absolutely be announcing our own in due course. When it comes to AI, you know, when I talk about the need for us to think like deal makers and not policy makers all the time, to be clear, I'm talking about that from a Liberal perspective. Liberals don't believe that governments should be at the centre of the economy, but rather the private sector should be. And so as we look at the potential for economic zones to host, whether it be the critical infrastructure for AI or whether it be for the processing of critical minerals or manufacturing, either traditional or advanced, the key thing is to have an abundance of affordable energy. And that is really the key component. And again, these things are not policy. These are ideas that we are exploring, and I'm looking at that one in particular with my two colleagues who are doing deep dives into AI, being Alex Hawke and Simon Kennedy.
Thank you.
Yeah, good example of the fiscal rules there. One question each if we can. 1:35 p.m. deadline. Shane Wright from the SMH.
Thanks, Tom. Mr O'Brien, Shane Wright from the SMH and The Age. The biggest blowout in the budget over the last 7 years has been the GST deal, which was $2 billion. It's on its way to $60 billion. You talk about spending priorities. Is the current GST deal and its structure a spending priority, or do you think a blowout of that magnitude is tenable, and are you prepared to wind it back?
Shane, we've been very clear since this term of government began that if the government wishes to engage with the opposition on holistic, comprehensive tax reform that would drive more efficiency into the tax system, we stand ready to engage with them. Having sat around the table at the productivity round table that the Treasurer pulled together, I see no such appetite. In fact, I see them very squarely trying to go after taxing capital. I don't see an appetite for more holistic reform. If they wish to change their mind on that, again, we will be constructive where we can and critical where we must, because if I give the Treasurer credit for anything, immediately after the election, he did publicly state, I think it was at a press club event, that his budget is not sustainable. So we stand ready to engage no matter what it is they bring forward and look forward to seeing it.
But you didn't mention the GST deal in that answer. That's what the question is. I'm just wondering what your attitude towards the GST deal that Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg put in place.
So you can assume if the government comes forward with any proposal talking about changes to GST, we will treat that as we treat anything they bring forward. We'll be constructive where we can, critical where we must. I don't think they will, by the way, but let's wait and see.
For what it's worth, Jim Chalmers said his budget was sustainable but needed to be more sustainable. But anyway, Anna Henderson from SBS.
Thank you.
That sounds like Jim Chalmers' double talk to me, Tom.
Anna Henderson from SBS. In terms of your comments around migration, what do you think went wrong with the coalition policy for a 25% migration cut at the last election? Do you think that kind of quantum is still something that should be on the table? And should skilled migrants in construction, childcare and aged care be absolutely ruled out of any cuts to come?
Anna, I have to apologise because I'm going to let you down with some of this answer. On one hand, I won't be prosecuting the policies we took to the last election. That election is now done. I do know that Senator John O'Donoghue and Senator Paul Scar are doing an enormous amount of work in this area, and Susan Lee has made it clear that they'll have more to say about the principles driving that policy area before the end of the year. So I won't try to preempt what they might come out with, and nor will I be making commentary on specific numbers.
When it comes to the economics, which you're obviously very centred on, you understand that people are needed to build the houses and to actually staff the aged care and childcare centres. How important do you think it is that those migrant worker roles continue?
More than happy to make some general comments in that regard. There is no doubt that skilled migration in particular remains vitally important to this country. And with the exception of our First Nations people, all of us came from somewhere. And what we need in this country is unity around a common set of values, and we need a very clear focus on what skills are needed to match the demands of the economy today, but also to be building the economy of tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tom Crowley from the ABC.
Thank you for your speech, Mr O'Brien. Angus Taylor, in the lead up to the last election, your predecessor, gave a speech to the Press Club where he talked about productivity, bracket creep, Labor's addiction to spending. Of course, at the election that followed, you were walloped. And to read some numbers from today's Australian election study just on some of those economic issues and how voters rated your message: cost of living -15, housing -18, tax -8, immigration -1, climate, your area, -23, and economic management for the first time in the history of this survey, -4 for the coalition. Heaven forbid that I ask you to prosecute the last election, so let me focus on the present instead. It is a similar message in some ways that you're offering today. What is different about what you're offering and what you hope to offer over the course of this term that will arrest what is pretty clearly a catastrophic situation where 1 in 5 Jesses at the last election put a number 1 for the coalition?
Look, thank you very much for reminding me how well we went at the election. Really needed that. But, you know, in truth, we have been learning lessons about it. And our leader made it very clear as we came to this term of government, we need to take the time to do that. And that is what we have been doing. And we've been doing it with humility, I have to say. But as I've already remarked, we've also been very values-led by it. And as we have been looking through our suite of policies, including in the economic area, we are going back to the basics of what the Liberal Party believes in. And what we do believe in is Jess, because we believe in the individual. We believe in her family, because, yes, we believe in the family. We believe in small business, in entrepreneurship, in enterprise more generally. We believe with rights come commensurate responsibilities. With effort comes reward. Those values are going to be driving our policies so that come the next election, you will be able to see our policies and see a clear line to the values of the party. That is something we could have done better at the last election, and that's as far as I'll go at prosecuting how the last election went.
Cam Redden from Sky News.
Mr O'Brien, thanks very much. Cameron Redden, Sky News. Jess would have heard governments and oppositions, including yours for years, make promises that her power bills would be coming down, but none have been able to do it in recent times without rebates. Even the chair of the Climate Authority said on Sky yesterday he couldn't say when bills would stop increasing, let alone when they would come down. So isn't it time for a bit of honesty with Jess that her power bills are going to go up regardless of who's in government while this transition is ongoing?
Cam, thank you. And I think you're right. If I can use a different word, trust. It's all about trust. And trust has been eroding in governments moreover. And when it comes to the subject you raise, energy, 2 elections ago now, we had the Albanese Labor Party promising a $275 reduction in household power bills. That was a false promise. It was broken. Even this last election, when it came to energy, they took a whopping big lie to the Australian people. Again, that prices are coming down. They were also untruthful about the cost of the coalition's plan. This erodes trust. Now, the key thing for Jess moving forward is to ensure that we can provide affordable energy. What I'd say to Jess, Cam, is look at the scoreboard and look at the record. Over the last term of the coalition government alone, energy prices came down by 10%. Emissions also came down, by the way. Since the Albanese government has come in, Jess, your energy bill's gone up around 40%. That's the same around the country. Emissions, by the way, haven't budged. So on one hand, I'd be saying to Jess, trust our record, but also I'd be saying to Jess, what you've seen within a 6-month period is the release of a detailed energy plan that will guarantee affordable energy. and certainly far cheaper than anything the Labor Party will deliver. That's what I'd be saying to Jess.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
Whether it's new nuclear or new coal, whatever it might be, though, when you're pledging affordable energy, are you saying you can cut prices dramatically or just stop them going up?
Well,
that trust question.
No, when it comes to the trust question, I think the biggest saving, which would be cheaper under us compared to Labor, Tom, would be around network charges more than anything. And sort of you mentioned some of the big baseload power sources. One of the economic benefits of that is you don't have to invest so much into transmission lines. And when all of us get our bill at home, if you have a look at it, it's probably around about 50% or more now as your network charges. One of the benefits of the plan we have is cost avoidance, which is why, again, it'll always be more affordable and cheaper under the coalition.
Alan Ransley from News Corp.
Thanks, Mr O'Brien, for your speech. Obviously, there's still 2.5 years to go before the next election, but at some point in that time, will you commit to releasing modelling, telling voters, showing voters how much your energy plan will make their energy more affordable? And Labor's put out some analysis today suggesting keeping coal-fired power stations online for another 10 years would cost $17 billion and also drive up their power prices. Would that be value for money for the taxpayers?
Look, thanks very much. And your question actually allows me to continue what I was saying to Cam before. Trust. I mean, yes, you're right. You have the Treasurer out there today purporting to know the cost of the coalition's policy, when in fact, to this day, 4 years in office, the Labor Party can still not tell the Australian people how they're going to achieve their 2030 target, how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay. Only a couple of months ago, they announced their 2035 target, and the Treasurer claims so much modelling was done by Treasury. Still to this day, he cannot tell the Australian people how much it's going to cost. As for the net zero by 2050, no, they will not tell the Australian people how much it's going to cost. And so for the same person who's not trustworthy when it comes to figures, has today come out and tried to model the coalition policy, I'll just be disregarding it entirely. I can assure you that the hard work is being done from the coalition's end, but our focus right now is calling out this government. You can't tell the Australian people that your prices are coming down when they know the truth. They'd be going up 40%. And you still have the Prime Minister, the Treasurer and the Energy Minister banging the table, saying we've got the cheapest form of energy. I think Australians know the truth. And the more the government tells them dishonesties, the more they erode trust.
Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Thanks, Tom. Mr O'Brien, can I bring you back to the productivity roundtable that you were at? And ask in the context of your dear couple, Jess and Matt, who both drive petrol cars, but they're really curious that this road user charge that everyone seemed to be enthusiastic about, including all the premiers, that this isn't being progressed. I want to get your thoughts on that. But also, Jess and Matt are really perplexed that they can't afford an EV card. And they've read in the newspaper, a very expensive one, the Australian Financial Review, Phil, that the EV tax break is going to cost $23 billion over a decade. Money that's going to the pretty well-heeled. On those two fronts, where do you sit?
Andrew, when I spent 3 days of my life locked up in a room without windows with Jim Chalmers and 25 other people, I wasn't there for anyone else other than 27 million Australians who weren't in the room, and that includes Jess. Now, in terms of the road user charge and how Jess and Matt might feel about it, I think they would have every right to be concerned that there's not equity in the system as it stands today. We have been consistently, as a coalition, calling on the government to bring forward a plan to deal with this issue. and not unlike other questions I've answered today. Once they do so, we'll be constructive where we can.
You must have a philosophical approach to, say, the EV tax break, one that was meant to cost, what, $500 million and is blown out considerably?
Yeah, so going on then to the fringe benefits tax carve-out for EVs, you're right. I do have a philosophical view on that, and that is it is patently unfair. So let's take Jess. You know, when Jess is able to work full-time, which she's not at the moment, but when she can, she earns $90,000 a year. If she uses the government's EV tax break, the fringe benefits tax mechanism, she can lease, let's say, a Tesla Model Y, and she can lease that for a period of time. When she brings out a mobile phone to do it, they ask her, how much money do you make? She puts in, oh, well, let's say 90,000. And yet, an old school friend of Jess's is a lawyer. He's on 200,000. He does the exact same thing, but of course he punches in 200,000. Over the life of that lease, Jess pays $8,000 more than her lawyer mate. The more money you make, the bigger the break you get under Labor. So philosophically, I'm absolutely opposed to that. Economically, I'm opposed. It is one of the most inefficient ways to try to cut emissions, and the Productivity Commission agrees with that. So we are absolutely opposed to Labor's EV FBT carve-out. Thanks, Andrew.
Are Jess and Matt watching? They're getting a good run today.
They're getting a very good run today, but you know, electricity is very expensive, Tom, so who knows if they've got it on.
Sure, they can afford the TV on. Corey McLeod from Innovation On.
Thank you for your address, Mr O'Brien. It was reported this morning that the Albanese government wouldn't be pursuing a standalone or designated AI Act. So in effect, I guess, reducing some of the red tape that I think people in your government would argue is holding us back. Setting aside critical infrastructure around data centres and AI, it would seem you're actually quite in alignment now on AI and the frameworks around it.
We certainly welcome the fact that they claim not to be pursuing an act. As I said in my speech, we also welcome their announcement of a new institute. Of course, you've got to wait to see the detail, which is why I deliberately use the word in principle. Let's wait to see the detail, because this government has unfortunately had an ability to over-regulate, which is why they introduced 5,000 additional regulations in the last term of government. So let's wait and see. But on that part, there does seem to be a degree of alignment. But the true Achilles heel, and this is not me saying this, these are the best experts in technology around the world. They point to energy. They point to energy. Australia can lead in AI in Southeast Asia and beyond. We have everything we need. The number one thing holding us back is energy. And this thing is racing fast. And the next 5 years are absolutely key. If the Albanese government continues to prosecute the case of net zero by 2050 and all the substantive policy levers around that, we will not be able to maximise the benefit of AI. It just can't happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom McElroy from The Guardian.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Mr O'Brien, for taking our questions. Picking up the theme of Jess and Matt, I wonder to what extent you think tax concessions for property investors are contributing to the fact that they can't afford to buy their own home and have to rent.
I think the biggest thing, Tom, for Jess and Matt is you need to get supply in. That's the number one thing.
Yeah, but what about tax concessions?
And therefore, it is key that we have a system that encourages investment in properties. And so I don't think that's where the problem lies. The problems are multiple. This government, again, as we know, is falling dreadfully short of its $1.2 million target of new homes. And it's not just the federal government. Of course, there are responsibilities at all three levels of government when it comes to getting more properties. That is the key issue. I would not be telling the truth if I said to Jess, oh, it's all due to the tax regime.
Is it at all due to the tax regime?
Again, it's all about supply, and we need to ensure that we encourage investment. And therefore, if you're asking, for example, capital gains tax and whatnot, to be candid, we don't support changes in that regard.
Thanks, Tom.
Brittany Levinson from the Canberra Times.
Thank you, Mr O'Brien, for your address. The State of the Service report is out today, and that shows that the APS headcount is almost at 200,000 across the nation. 70,000 of those are in Canberra. Is the Coalition still committed to cutting 41,000 public service jobs, to rein in that spending that you're talking about today? And if not, do you think there's a chance that by 2028 there might be even bigger cuts on the table?
So again, we drew a line under our policies that we took to the last election, and so more would be said in this area, over time. So I won't be talking about numbers today, but I do want to go back in responding to your question, if I can, to the word trust. You will recall before this year's election, the Labor Party severely beat up on the Coalition on the issue of public servants and whether or not there will be a decrease in numbers. And with all of that, look at the announcement over the last 24 hours from the Labor Party. And they wonder why the Australian people are losing trust. Now, that announcement, by the way, I'm still waiting to see the detail, because I listened to the Finance Minister who says one thing and then the Treasurer who says another. So I'm not exactly sure where that's going. But again, it comes down to trust on the part of the Coalition. We'll have more to say in due course on that, but we've drawn a line from what we took to the last election.
The 5% reduction that they're aiming for at the moment, though, do you think that's appropriate?
Again, as I said, we'll wait to see what the detail is. If I listen to the Finance Minister, it's one thing, the Treasurer, it's another. Let's wait to see. But again, we'll be very upfront about that. Once the detail's clear.
Without numbers, though, the Coalition thought the public service was way too big before the last election. It's hard to think that you wouldn't think it's still too big to some degree now.
There's no doubt. Under this government, there has been a ridiculous blowout. That hasn't changed. The problem statement has not changed.
Okay. Andrew Green from The Nightly.
Thank you for today's TED Talk. Can I take you to the continuing discussion of leadership in your party? We've heard about Angus Taylor's ambitions, Andrew Hastie's ambitions, more recently Melissa McIntosh's ambitions. Can you give us a bit of an update on where Ted O'Brien's leadership ambitions may be? How many members of your party do you think would support you in the future, and how much are you hitting the phones?
I could tell you my ambition. My ambition is to be the next Treasurer of Australia under a Lee-led coalition government.
And if that isn't the case in the future, what about further ambition?
I don't know why you're doubting me.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Zach De Silva from AAP.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Mr O'Brien, for your speech. On tax, who are you looking at giving a tax cut to? Your colleague, Andrew Bragg, this morning said that you should be looking at middle and high income earners. He said low income earners don't pay much tax. How does that fit in with the tax policy that you're working up? And if I can break Tom's one question only rule, are Jess and Matt real?
Jess and Matt are very real, but there just happens to be millions of them. Look, in terms of the design of personal income taxes that we're going to be taking at the next election, today, 2.5 years out from the next election, is not the time to be furnishing that. Let's keep in mind, between now and the next election, there'll probably be 7 to 8 budget updates from the government. And so we don't know what mess we're going to be dealing with. But we're doing a lot of heavy lifting at the moment, and we'll continue to do that. But beyond that, I won't be disclosing any of the design features.
Going to squeeze in Julie Hare, National Press Club Director.
Thank you very much for your speech, Julie Hare. He stole my question, so I'll ask you this one instead, which was, are Jess and Matt real? So you arrived here and you said this was a pitch to young people to get them to vote for the coalition, but you didn't mention rising student debt, which is largely a result of a Morrison-era policy, the growing intergenerational wealth divide, or how you would address rising house prices and rent. How does preaching about lowering government debt convince young people to vote for the coalition?
Look, thank you. And if I was given another half an hour, we probably could have covered off a lot of other things. And so, if anything, I was conscious of packing too much content into just 30 minutes odd. Look, there are multiple areas where young Australians are being let down. I meant it when I said that there's a fraying of the intergenerational compact. And Australians feel it, you know, Jess and Matt feel it, and students feel it. There's no one out there, despite Australia being such a wonderful country, the best in the world, we're not immune from these sort of problems. Again, we're going to have policies that'll roll out in all of these areas. Today, I just wanted to send that very simple message to Jess and people like her that we get it. We understand what they're going through. It's not just about her, it's about her kids. It's about her husband. It's about their friends, their local community. It's about their mum and dad, her mum and dad. That's the message today. My colleagues and I will have a lot more to say about a whole bunch of areas, including housing, including students and whatnot, before long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're out of time, which means you can just give a yes or no to this final question. You like to
you said there was only one question each, and this is your...
I just sort of keep things moving. You like to burnish the speed limit, if you like, tax to the GDP limit. Are you looking at a spending to GDP limit?
Well, you're right to ask, because spending as a percentage of GDP has gone from 24% to 27% under the Albanese government. So it's a real concern. But, Tom, we're looking at multiple options when it comes to fiscal rules.
Okay.
And unfortunately, today is not the day for me to be releasing them.
You're looking at it, I'll take it from that. I know you don't think you have much in common with Chris Bowen, but you mentioned the Press Club membership card. That was my fault. It was a fiery debate. I was a bit flustered. So that means you got Chris Bowen's, he's got a Ted O'Brien card, and now you're going to have a Ted O'Brien membership card as well.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Ted.
Thank you.